Chapter 7. Sloshok Goslot, Battle of the Gosloth. The connecting vessel is splitting off from our space-time. At the report of the Drokia Royrothasair, Surveying Communications Officer, Hecto Commander Leksha nodded silently. The great throng already gathered on the bridge, comprising all necessary personnel, was as on edge as ever. Not counting the campaign of little consequence that was the conquest of Hyde, the last time the Star Forces had shown their superiority was during the battle for Camentail, 47 years prior. The current Empress, Lamaz, had fought in that campaign as Crown Princess and Imperial Fleet Commander-in-Chief, a time that felt like a lifetime ago even to the long-lived of. Of course, there was no one on the patrol ship Gosloth who had any actual combat experience. It was little wonder they were all bundles of nerves. It was Vice Captain Rieria who was the first among them to recapture his usual composure. "So the young ones have left," he told his captain from behind her. "I hope nothing happens to them." Leksha rested her chin in her hands as she stared at the blue blip getting farther and farther away from them. "I hope so, too." Then Rieria smiled. They've both had very unique upbringings. In the future, they may just grow to be fascinating characters indeed. Though they're probably fascinating enough as it is. "You're not wrong," Leksha concurred. The royal princess had been raised in a royal house, seen as the spring of all that is of. And she had been admitted into an academy at the young age of 13. She was the model of. Meanwhile, Yarluk Dryor was an imperial noble, but an idiosyncratic one that couldn't help but drag his Landerness with him wherever he went. The two were almost polar opposites. "I also hope they exert a positive influence on each other as well," Rieria continued. My Rieria." Surprised, Leksha turned to look at him. "You're thinking like a regular Basiga instructor. Are you planning to switch careers and head to an academy?" "Don't be ridiculous," said Rieria with a wave of his hand. "I don't have the character necessary to be responsible for someone's education. I'm far more comfortable on the front lines. Especially now that a war is brewing. Come now, you don't need to hold yourself back. I won't think you a coward. I wouldn't blame you for calling me a coward if I should ever petition to be transferred to a behind-the-scenes post. But as of now, I have no desire to do so." That's too bad. Am I that terrible a vice captain?" Rieria smiled ironically. "I'll keep you in suspense until your performance review." Leksha returned the smile. Then she looked straight ahead once again. "What are your thoughts on Lonnie Yarluk Dryor, Mr. Instructor?" "I think he's a fine young man. He's always silently questioning whether what he does measures up to of standards. I've grown rather fond of the look in those eyes of his. I like him too." She grinned as she recalled her time with him. "I liked how often he smacks you with blunt, straightforward questions. I've never given the nature of our race as much thought as I have in the past 5 days. Lanyu is a little too outspoken to be a well-behaved imperial citizen. He should dial it down a little, for his own sake." "That is him dialing it down. I believe that the time she spends with Lanyu will do Her Highness some good, though." "Agreed. Bringing those two together might be my greatest accomplishment. But only if they do manage to make it to the capital. You're quite worried about them, aren't you?" There was a hint of laughter in Rieria's voice. "What, I can't worry about them?" She shot her vice captain a defiant look. "I'd say that our situation is the more worrying one. That's why you sent them off to begin with. I don't think we have time to spare worrying about them. Though it pains me to find fault with the feelings of my superior officer." "You, feeling guilty for criticizing a superior? Now this is an amazing development." The captain stared at the steadily approaching band of yellow blips. "But it's just as you say. Now is the time to fulfill my responsibility to my crew." It was 1937. "Captain." It was Senior Communications Officer and Rearguard Star Pilot Yunsarua. "The unidentified space-time bubbles have entered within range of our transmissions. Tell them the name of the ship and ask who they are," Leksha ordered. "Roger." The Gosloth proceeded to engage in interbubble communication. "This is the patrol ship Gosloth. Please communicate the name of your ship and your affiliation." After a frustratingly long interval, they finally received their reply. The senior communications officer scanned the transmission pattern that appeared on the inner surface of the space-time bubble using her frosh. This isn't a message. It's an Aga Izophote, signal of challenge." "Then it's settled," Leksha murmured. Her faint hopes that it was an allied fleet on the move due to some situation she wasn't aware of now lay dashed. But the newfound certainty actually cleared her head. The signal of challenge won't stop blaring. Will we respond? No, ignore it. If they want to toy with us, then let them try their hardest to catch up. While the signal continued ringing like a bloodthirsty war cry, the 10 bubbles closed in ever nearer. The bubbles had been represented before as yellow blips, but were now red, confirmed enemies. 2030. It is time, Captain, Rieria informed her calmly. Okay. Lexia broadcast the following message to all crew members at all posts. Attention. This is your captain. The unidentified space-time bubbles have made their hostility clear. We will be shifting to Stage 1 war preparations. Now equip your helmets and assume your battle positions. Her announcement was accompanied by an alarm klaxon. Before the captain's seat, the Latinue tactical control counter slowly rose. Its screen displayed the map of flat space, but only at a limited range of distance, so the enemy hadn't appeared on it yet. Lexia inserted one of her circlet's access cables into the control counter. In spite of their captain's orders, not a single person on the bridge had put on their pressurized helmets. The space-time bubble engine beneath the bridge was securely protected by a shared spherical barrier. If the air seal there were to be broken, it would spell the ship's doom. In short, it was pointless to wear a pressurized helmet on the bridge, so there was an unwritten rule not to. Battle stationing complete for all hands, reported Vice Captain Rieria, who was monitoring the devices that displayed the state of the crew's onboard deployment. Prepare for Hoxatiax mine battle. The captain wasted no time. Load mines number 7 through 10 with Besh antimatter fuel. Sadiuth Gorhoka, mobile space-time mines, or Hoxath for short, were unmanned but equipped with their own space-time bubble engines. They were akin to miniature-scale interstellar ships in their own right. Their volume and mass were significant, and as such, not even a gigantic patrol ship could house very many. The Gosloth could only hold 10, and numbers 1 through 6 had unfortunately already been used for practice exercises. Their explosive impelling force derived from matter-antimatter annihilation. Since it was exceedingly dangerous to maintain the antimatter fuel if it was equipped on a continuous basis, they had made a habit of getting it supplied from a mothership's Bikek fuel tank. Supervisor and Deca Commander Jumriwa ordered the fuel transferred to the deck containing the antimatter tanks. The antiprotons flowed into the mine deck, conducted by magnetic pipes. They allocated the antimatter fuel into magnetically confined containers of the 4 mines on deck. Loading of antimatter fuel complete, conveyed Senior Gunner and Vanguard Star Pilot Sariush. The captain heard him loud and clear. Fire the mines. Keep them within the bubble until the time is right. The 4 mines were pitched. They settled into the same pocket of space-time as Gosloth and began to slowly rotate. 2130. Enemy bubbles have entered mine range, reported the surveying communications officer. Sariush looked up inquiringly at the captain, but she shook her head wordlessly. The 10 bubbles pressed in even further, steadily assuming a battle formation encircling the Gosloth. A textbook attack formation, Lexia remarked. Generate the bubbles on the mines. Generating bubbles on mines, parroted the Tlakia Hoax officer, mine gunner. After quickly working the controls, the mine gunner looked up and said, "Bubble generation confirmed." The enemy bubbles had already appeared on the control counter screen. They were accompanied by red numbers. Aim the mines. 7 on 3, 8 on 1, 9 on 6, 10 on 7, Lexia commanded. Ideally, they would land 2 mine blasts on each space-time bubble. In this situation, however, they had no such hopes. Inputting data. The mine gunner's voice raised the tension of the bridge. Targets aligned. Lexia switched her circlet to external data mode. The data of the ship's sensors flooded into her brain's real albedo area. Her perception of the bridge disappeared as she focused her frocross. Lexia was now at the center of a spherical space. The inner surface of their bubble whimpered with blotches of gray, the product of all the space-time particle collisions. It was pregnant with the stillness preceding a battle. Prepare for Dadios, normal space battle. Fire up the main engine system. Roger. Firing up main engine system, repeated Jumriwa. The The telltale rumble of antimatter and matter's bitter quarrel rattled the ship. There were, however, many crew members who saw the vibrations as ominous. Senior gunner, prepare the ERGF, electromagnetic cannons. Roger. Preparing the EM cannons. Vanguard Sarish equipped his control glove. He was in charge of steering while within the bubble. He released the safety on the EM cannons and loaded their first volleys. EM cannon preparations complete. The red blips had the blue blip, the Gosloth, completely encircled. They swooped in curved trajectories while closing the distance on their prey. It really is right out of the drill manual, Lexia thought with some admiration. It was clear to see that the enemy possessed a high level of proficiency. It was exceptionally difficult to maintain that clean formation while in flat space, where communication between units was tricky at best. But her faith that her crew was not inferior when it came to skill was more than justified. While the Gosloth may have been commissioned a mere 3 months prior, and one would be hard-pressed to claim that a sense of unity had formed in the crew, taken individually, they were all seasoned soldiers, each capable of satisfactorily carrying out their respective duties. 2132. Lexia stood up from her chair and extracted the command staff from her belt. Then, the captain's seat sank into the floor. Using the call device on her control counter, she addressed her entire crew. My dears, it's showtime. I'm sure you are tired of waiting. Salporga. Commence battle. As soon as Lexia puffed up her chest, the alarm klaxon trilled through the air all across the ship. She pointed the command staff at her mine gunner. Detach all the mines. Detaching mines, said the gunner. Number 7 undergoing Gore Ryotkoth, space-time severance. Number 8, likewise. Number 9. Each mine exited her field of Frocraw's perception, one after the other. For new blue blips shot out of the blue blip that represented the Gosloth. Each traced its own path of attack to a red blip. Number 8 undergoing Gore Taroth, space-time fusion. Enemy bubble number 1 destroyed. At the surveying communications officer's report, the bridge suddenly burst with emotion. Though Lexia had no way of knowing it, the ship hiding within Bubble 1 was the United Humankind Peacekeeping Forces destroyer, the KO 3799. Captain Kartzen and the 23 other crew would go down as the first casualties of this lengthy war. Bombs 7 and 10 also hit their marks, consigning 2 more enemy bubbles into oblivion. The space-time bubbles smashed up against the space-time particles, causing the fabric of flat space to undulate. Number 9, however, missed its mark. The enemy bubble continued closing in as though nothing had happened. Turn 40 degrees right. We're going to ram enemy 4, she commanded the real Biga Flockfloshothasair, bubble steerer navigator, with her command staff. The enemy, meanwhile, was fusing with their space-time from many different directions, seemingly determined to thrash the Gosloth in a group attack. The basic blueprint of battle involved faithfully executing on a solid strategy, but the Gosloth had no obligation to go along with that. Roger, said the navigator. Around the stationary blue dot, the flat space map rapidly zoomed as Red Blip 4 charged toward them. They're 100 Sheskidler away. 50 away. Initiating space-time fusion at position. The captain's Frocraws detected that part of the inner surface of their bubble had already begun to froth due to bombardment by a large number of space-time particles. Direct the ship's bow into the point of fusion. Lexia thrust her command staff at the ominously frothing portion of the bubble's inner barrier. That staff was pointing at what the devices on the bridge had detected, and after the computing crystals processed that information, it was beamed into Sariash's Frosh. Now, the senior gunner's Frocraws sensed the external environment, just as the captain's did. The command staff's motions overlapped with that sensation, in a way that could be understood by the Vanguard star pilot. As soon as we fuse, fire at will. Roger. But Sariash's voice had grown high-pitched. All hands, prepare for an EM cannon volley, Vice Captain Rieria advised. The ship's bow was pushed into the froth. Space-time fusion underway. What they saw defied all expectation. A giant tunnel opened its maw within the quiet sphere of space. At the other end of it lay an alternate universe, and at its center lay an enemy warship. Its aim to destroy the Gosloth undisguised, it faced off against them. The very second Lexia realized there was a tunnel, the EM cannons were fired. The Gosloth's main weapons, it sported 4 EM cannons in the front and 2 in the back. All at once, the 4 front cannons fired Spy-It fusion warheads, accelerated all the way to 0.01 times the speed of light. Another volley followed soon after. The massive recoil overloaded the ship's gravity control system, and all the crew members that weren't fixed in place toppled forward. Lexia clasped onto the control counter and endured the tremors. The 8 fusion warheads jetted in unpredictable trajectories and dodged the enemy's defensive barrage to hurtle steadily onward. With the warheads' last attitude control, all the fuel they had left was fired through their backs, and they made their final bursts of acceleration flying toward their target from all directions. The enemy also fired its Lunius antiproton cannon. However, the flow of antiprotons was shot from almost point-blank range, ricocheting pointlessly into space off the magnetic field the Gosloth had laid out. The enemy ship exploded into smithereens, but they had no time to celebrate their victory. The enemy is fusing with this space-time, ships 2, 5, 6. The inner wall of the space-time bubble was already showing signs of entry from 6 different spots. Bow. Lexia thrust her staff at enemy Bubble 2, having concluded it would be the first to arrive. The ship's nose detached. An instant before space, merciless and full of enmity, opened its maw to usher in the enemy. A volley was launched at it. But they couldn't stop to check the results. They were already on to their next mark. Another enemy vessel was threatening to breach nearly right behind the patrol ship. Stern. Lexia thrust her staff over her shoulder. In order to slightly shift position, the Gosloth prepared its attitude and fired 2 fusillades from its twin back cannons. Despite having just broken through, enemy Bubble 6 immediately proceeded to escape, detaching from their space-time. In that moment, the first fusillade burst into their space-time. The second detonated within the patrol ship's bubble to no effect, but the enemy bubble dispersed as soon as it had fled. To one of the ship's sides, enemy Bubble 5 had completed fusion with their space-time. Neither the bow nor the stern could face it in time. Use the mobile cannons. She thrust her staff to the side so that they could mow it down. The Gosloth was equipped with mobile Vaklanu, laser cannons, as well as antiproton cannons, controlled centrally from the bridge. The cannoneers aimed cannons both big and small and unleashed torrents of Clonraz, lasers, and antiprotons at the enemy. These, however, were not furnished with the homing mechanisms of electromagnetically propelled shells, and their accuracy rate was exceedingly low, to say nothing of their inferior firepower. The enemy ship detached its 4 antimatter ballistic missiles and fired its antiproton cannons. The missiles were not the problem. A missile that hadn't been accelerated beforehand lacked in speed, making it easy prey for the patrol ship's rounds of defensive fire. However, the antiproton cannons equipped on the enemy ship's bow were more potent than the Gosloth's mobile counterparts, and as such were capable of obliterating a giant vessel like it in the blink of an eye with a clean hit. The enemy's torrent of antiprotons formed a clump and then surged toward the Gosloth. Though slowed by the Gosloth's Sniseb magnetic shield, the antiproton torrent pierced into its outer hull like it was Ryoabin crystal pottery. It instantly penetrated and boiled the water stored within the barrier walls. Then it reached the inner hull, composed of heavy metals, and devastated it. Meanwhile, the boiling water blew away part of the outer hull and the attitude control nozzle. The Gosloth's computing crystals didn't need to wait for the direction of a supervisor. They detected the damage and switched the ship to a mode where it could stay in control of its locomotion without that nozzle. Even so, the ship had lost most of its maneuverability. The space-time bubble, agitated at multiple points, began to distort and curve in on itself. Within the writhing space, the battle was in a state of transition. 2305. Enemy 10 was now a lump of plasma. 2 ships remained. The Gosloth was also wounded. Around half of its mobile cannons had been rendered silent, while many attitude control nozzles were damaged as well. Major damage on Laser 3. Front attitude control nozzle 3, incapacitated. The main engine system's power output, its unpleasant news was pouring in from everywhere. There was nary a second to rest for Jumriua, who had organized an emergency repair team and sent them to places where the damage could be seen to. Section 907 undergoing depressurization. No remaining crew there. Locking down. Sweat glistened on the brow of Dish, the clerk, as well. There were more than 50 dead or missing. That was a significant portion of a warship's crew of 220. Lexia kept her eyes closed and strained her frosh to perceive what she could. Debris drifted all throughout their pocket of space. A vast number of broken-off fragments cluttered her senses. There were probably bodies amidst the cloud, though they were beyond saving. Any lifeboats sent to retrieve them would simply get shot down. Besides, their uniforms were too thin to protect them from the raging radioactive winds. The two enemies flitted about, like a pair of butterflies, and spat their fell exhalations upon the Gosloth. Try though they did to hit them with the EM cannons, the painfully sluggish patrol ship was a sorrowful sight now. The enemy dodged their attacks with utter ease. Of course, the mobile cannons never ceased hurling fire at them. Their lasers broke through the outer hull of the enemy and sublimated its splintered pieces. The ionized hydrogen of the warship's driving flames piled on the resultant effluvium, and the particle density within its space-time bubble gradually decreased. Wandering protons and antiprotons collided and transformed into electromagnetic waves. This microcosmos blazed like the beginnings of the Drian Big Bang. It wasn't, however, a universe that held the spark of new life. It could give rise only to unadulterated death. Bare hatred clashed against bare hatred and burst into ever greater slaughter. They tried to get part of the enemy ship to fall into firing range of their back EM cannons by directing it there through their mobile cannons firing line. Stern, Lexu alerted the senior gunner. They fired 3 volleys, almost as though they were venting their anger. The heavy recoil kicked the patrol ship's massive bulk away. Behind them, a fireball. Just one left. There was no doubt the captain was thinking what every member of her crew was. But the last ship peppered them from the side with antiproton cannon fire. That would be a fatal blow. EM shield down, Jumriua gasped. Despair cascaded over the bridge. Don't give up now, my darlings, she scolded them. We're going to knock them out of our pocket of space. Bow. The Gosloth slowly began to change the direction of its bow. The ship was almost sputtering now, as though indignant it still couldn't catch a break. Focus mobile cannon fire on the enemy's right side. Full throttle ahead. However, the enemy ship was also shooting fiercely forward, its antiproton cannon fire unrelenting. A flood of antiprotons that vastly outstripped what they'd been bathed in before the destruction of the EM shield rocked the Gosloth. The mobile cannon fire chipped at the enemy's outer hull, but they couldn't impede its path. At last, the streak of antiprotons penetrated through the Gosloth's outer hull, and then through its inner hull like a hot knife through butter, striking the antimatter fuel aboard. Its magnetic cage demolished, the freed antiprotons attacked the very matter the patrol ship was composed of. 2327. The Gosloth was now so much dust. Jinto and Lafier knew nothing of its demise. Though it was true that mass waves permeated all of space, the connecting vessel's feeble equipment couldn't pick them up while the signals of the gate were interfering. That might have been a kindness to them. Though they weren't totally bereft of hope, the mood in that steerer's room was already very dark. Jinto was sitting uncomfortably in his assistant steerer's seat. Unlike the small docking vessel they'd ridden together before, a connecting vessel that sailed through flat space couldn't be piloted through just a control glove. That was why there were the controls that Jinto pictured when he thought spaceship in front of the chairs. That being said, there was not much need in this sector, where gates were few and far between, to work the controls very frequently. A sullen Lafier didn't speak a solitary word as she glowered at the screen displaying the map of flat space. Jinto stole a glance at the seat next to him and sighed surreptitiously. Their space-time bubble was, as all others, a universe in itself. And its sole occupant, save for a modicum of floating particles, was the connecting vessel. Behind the seats of the steerer's room lay a yacht bell, airlock room, as well as a washroom and nap room. That was the entire living space entrusted to what, in their universe, amounted to all of humanity. We're the only ones in the universe. And half of the universe's intelligent life had sunk into a profound melancholy. The other half was not exactly feeling chipper either, but he did feel like this universe could do with at least a little cheer. Leifier. Jinto tried to start a conversation. Leifier raised her head. There was no way he could guess what she was thinking about from her expression. You're the Viscountess of Parian, right? That's right. I wanted to ask you about your fief. What's the Burskor Paryun, Viscountdom of Parian, like? Given that Parian means land of the rose, I assume there are a lot of roses. No, while hardly enthusiastic, Leifier didn't rebuff his efforts. There aren't even any lichens, let alone roses. There aren't so much as microbes on any planet out there. Then why is it called the Land of the Rose? The man in charge of surveying it had a soft spot for flowers and basically just felt like going around naming them after various kinds. Jiryunyu, Land of the Lily, Speciunyu, Land of the Camellia, all sorts. That's all there is to it. Huh. All right then, what's it like? There isn't much to say. It's a system with a yellow star and 7 planets. The second planet could be human habitable with some work. I think I'd like to fiddle around with that planet once I'm free of my duties as an Imperial. I want to make the whole surface of Parian bloom with its namesake roses. That sounds wonderful. I like to think so. And with that, the curtain of silence was drawn once again. Jinto racked his mind once again. How could he beat this acrid silence? But it was Leifier who broke it. Jinto. Yeah, you have my gratitude. For what? You're thinking of me, aren't you? I can't say the way you're doing so is terribly sophisticated, but it's heartening nonetheless. Well, I'm sorry I'm so awkward. Jinto was simultaneously miffed and relieved. Don't be angry, Leifier smiled. I'm trying to thank you. Me? Angry? Leifier stared at the screen again. I hate it, Jinto. When the all-important time came, I was totally useless. Way to hurt a guy's feelings, murmured Jinto. Huh. She cast a doubtful glance his way. You're not useless, you're saving me. If you weren't here, I'd be lost. But I guess my life in your hands isn't enough to satisfy your lofty sense of obligation. You're right. Forgive me. Besides, I'm sure the ship will come out okay, Jinto asserted groundlessly. Yes, I'm sure, too, she mumbled, but more to convince herself than anything else. Hey, Jinto. Yeah? Do you remember my birth secret story? Course. Jinto was mystified as to why that, of all things, had been brought up again. Don't tell anybody what I'm about to tell you. Nice, I love secrets, he said as cheerily as possible so as to improve her mood. My gene donor is the captain. What? Jinto thought he might have misheard her. But that would make Hecto Commander Lexu your mother? No, she's not my mother. She's my gene donor. Sorry, I'm still thinking like a lander, forget I said that, he said. But she didn't really feel like she was related to you. Or did she? The captain had called her, her dear highness. He had felt something there that transcended the surface-level superior-subordinate relationship. What do you think the Star Forces are? It doesn't matter that she's an old acquaintance. It only matters when we're alone together. Yeesh, sounds so complicated. Like. Wow, though. I felt proud to know Kuoplakia, Lady Plakia. I've known the captain since I was little, so I've always respected her. I'm proud that half of me comes from her. I was a daughter of love. She was my father's Yoff lover. I always suspected it, wanted it to be true. If you've known her for so long, couldn't you have just asked? Jinto was almost dumbfounded, despite himself, at just how thoroughly blood and family were separate enough custom. I already told you. I wasn't an adult yet, so without my father's permission, No, I mean, why didn't you ask her? You know, directly? Leifier opened her eyes wide and stared fixedly at Jinto, who suddenly felt uneasy. Did I say something stupid? She nodded vigorously. Incredibly. Oh? All right, I'll bite. Is asking her directly really that unthinkable? There's such a thing as manners. Uh-huh. So it's rude to ask a gene donor if they're your gene donor. It's extremely embarrassing, Jinto. I see. Jinto crossed his arms and chewed it over. Nope. Don't get it. Why is it embarrassing? It needs a reason to be embarrassing? Things that are embarrassing just are. Well, now that she mentions it, I guess that's true. Jinto forced himself to go with it. After all, asking someone, "Are you my mom?" would take quite some courage even according to his own non-off sensibilities. Even if I had asked, she wouldn't have answered me. The only one who can tell a child about their girlish, genetic information is their parent. And that's good manners too? Yes, that's good manners. Sounds complicated. I don't think it is. I'd love it if I could take you to my home planet one day and have you live there for a handful of years. Then the meaning of the word complicated might come to light. Okay. Once my responsibilities as an Imperial are behind me, I wouldn't mind letting you take me there, Leifir said, her voice a bit livelier now. It'll be my pleasure. But Jinto had remembered a bitter truth. You've forgotten, Leifir. When that time comes, you'll have aged only 10 years. You'll still look young and beautiful. I, on the other hand, will be either stupidly old or already dead. But couldn't you have asked her if she was your father's? I mean, Filar Cryob's lover? Is that rude too? Of course it is. If you say so. I do. Is this complicated to you as well? Very, Jinto assured her. Who told you that the Hecto Commander is Filar Cryob's lover then? No one had to tell me. It was obvious. The captain was always visiting at the Larbe Royal Palace. Sounds complicated. I'm tired of hearing you say that, Jinto. It's annoying. He shrugged. Don't worry about it. Leifir looked at him like she wanted to say something, but she returned to eyeing the screen. My genetics aside, I love Lady Plagia. She was already worthy of respect even at the palace, but I gained even more for her aboard ship. The other star pilots and NCCs did too. There were some I didn't like very much, but I hope they're all okay. Leifir hung her head as though in prayer. Yeah. Jinto recalled all the people with whom he'd conversed on the patrol ship. It had only been 5 days, but in that time, he'd met nothing but good-natured folks. His preconception of the Ov as cruel invaders was completely turned on its head. At the very least, he had no reason to wish them dead. Leifir remained motionless for a little while. The sensation that she was drowning at the bottom of the ocean, that Jinto been trying to dispel, came roaring back. This time around, there was just nothing Jinto could say. He stared at the steering controls vacantly. Finally, Leifir raised her head. Jinto, could you tell me about your home? Sure, no problem. Jinto was relieved. Where should I start? Unlike your fief, there's plenty to talk about. Jinto suddenly realized he'd been unconsciously fidgeting with the imitation jewel on his chest. The creature engraved on it was that furriest of fish, the Rezwan. He decided to lead with all the details about the Rezwan's absolutely wretched diet. Over the next 2 days, apart from their alternating sleeping shifts, Jinto spent nearly the entire time filling her in on the life forms of Martinu, though much of it was only vaguely recalled and much of it was outright fabrication on his part. And, to his surprise, he'd succeeded in making Leifir laugh quite a few times. After their 2 days on the connecting vessel, the pair arrived at the Lyom Score Feb dock, Feb-Barony.